Big atmospheric river brewing in the Pacific. We're tracking the changes, and it has been a fickle forecast, to say the least. I'm ABC 10 Chief Meteorologist Monica Woods. We are looking at a weather impact alert for a couple of days. We'll start it off with our Friday forecast. This is only going to be for the Sierra because we are looking at snow accumulation. It is heading into a weekend. We tend to see bigger volumes of traffic heading into the Sierra. We're going to follow that up Sunday into Monday for the Sierra with moderate snow again, snow below the passes and travel delays. Now, midweek next week, it gets a little bit more dicey. We have that large atmospheric river brewing in the Pacific with widespread impacts expected. The deal is the path continues to change. So we're just kind of putting it out there right now that we're going to be tracking a lot. Taking a look at that winter weather advisory, that's going to be in place right through the Sierra spine into our Friday late afternoon. As you'll see for the valley, a hit or miss shower is all we're going to see for our Friday forecast, whereas the Sierra a bit more consistent in terms of that snow. So that will continue to fall through our Friday. Now we'll continue to see that through our Friday evening, but then everything backs off and we have a beautiful Saturday on tap to kick off the weekend. Then Sunday comes around and we're right back at it. This time, it does look impressive in terms of the rainfall, but in terms of totals, it's a little bit more on the lighter side. The snow will continue to pick up, though, for the Sierra heading into our Sunday. As far as the Pacific, it's been very active. Most of the weather systems somewhat falling apart as they've been heading inland throughout parts of California. But the big one that's brewing out here is still taking shape, and the path, again, has been bouncing around. Some of the weather models taking it farther to the north. Others have been farther to the south. And I'm going to show you the differences in each of those paths. I would say this: if you have big plans for next week, make sure you keep it right here on ABC 10. On our ABC 10 Plus channel, we will continue to have extended forecasts, explainers, and those weather and climate specials are always there. But these extended forecasts are going to be especially impactful heading into what appears to be a rather active weather cycle, especially into next week. Because of this, the Department of Water Resources, California Department of Water Resources, doing that fourth snow survey of the year a little bit ahead of schedule. The deal is they just wanted to get ahead of those storms coming in just to make sure that they could indeed get that fourth snow survey in. The averages that came in for today at Phillips Station, where you see where they put that big snow tube into the ground, that's to see what the snowpack looks like, the depth, the water content, that came in at 70%. Statewide, we're sitting at 90% of average. All of this going into kind of their equations of how they're going to calculate how much water will be available for the dry part of the year. So as of the latest reading, our allocations did increase to 40%. That's up from last month of 35%. We had those cold, wet storms come in March above average reservoir levels, and an increase in that snowpack really helped to boost those allocation forecasts. The final allocation numbers, though, coming out in May or June. And this all goes into building our water year. We're already seeing that 50% of our annual precipitation in the rear view mirror after that fall rain started up October into November. This is our peak snowpack. At this part of the season, we start to see that peak snow melt start to happen. April into May, the temperatures are warmer, and quite frankly, the weather systems happen to be quite warmer typically as well. That's not to say we couldn't get a cold system coming through, but it is the point in the season that we usually see that snowpack coming to an end and the peak snow melt beginning. So it's kind of a flip of what we've been seeing the past couple of months. And this will come in handy as well as our water starts to become our highest demand. We're starting to see a lot of agriculture bloom, as well as the need to kind of continue that through the drier part of the year. It's kind of odd in California because we head into this drier part of the year, and that's really when we see the agriculture ramp up. I one time asked a farmer, I don't understand this. We don't get any rain. How can agriculture be such a big commodity here? And they said it's because we can control how much water. So we don't get the mold, and we really can plant what we want. We have this beautiful control over the water that we're using for our crops. So that's kind of the backstory of all that. Our major reservoir supply, as I mentioned, this is a big part of how we're able to feed a large part of California through the drier summer months, and we're well above average. And most reservoirs, by the way, have been coming up a little bit. We're starting to head into that time of year where we will start to see those reservoirs start to fill up before they start to empty through the drier part of the year. So even New Melones, Don Pedro, San Luis, Millerton, all starting to come up a little bit in terms of our capacity. As far as the averages, those have remained about 100 to over 100% of average nearly all season long. That despite the fact that the precipitation numbers just haven't been all too great here. We're still roughly about 1 inch to 3 inches behind throughout much of central and northern California. Redding and Eureka, though, kind of the outliers there, well above average. We had those early season rainstorms come through, those big atmospheric rivers that bumped up those numbers early in the game. And so it was just off to a great start there and really has continued to follow suit. Now, Southern California has again remained critically dry in some locations. The drought monitor really not changing too much for Southern California over the week-to-week averages, but it's something that will continue to follow. March has come in with very little fanfare in terms of total precipitation, but we just didn't need too much given that we've had a couple of good years here. So in terms of what we saw, January was the big player that just brought us extremely dry conditions. And unfortunately for Southern California, it has meant for the early part of the year, some dangerous fire conditions. February, great month, but it just wasn't enough given that March didn't come in above average to make up for those deficits in January. Not to say that we couldn't still pick up some rain, but we're heading into that time of year where historically that just doesn't usually happen. We start to see those rain totals drop off for our averages, certainly in the next month or two, to where we're barely getting anything at all. This is a big deal. The 8 to 14 day climate outlook from the Climate Prediction Center kind of flipped the switch here to a likely drier scenario throughout much of California. And I'm really seeing some clues here indicating that the big atmospheric river off the coast isn't going to be a direct hit for us. I'll play it out here. And again, this is what we're going to be watching. Temperature wise, it looks like we're going to be pretty much near normal in the 8 to 14 day outlook. Our model snowfall numbers, this will just be for our Friday and Sunday into Monday storm cycle. We're anywhere from about 1 to almost 3 feet of snow in some locations. That's been pretty consistent here for the past 24 hours. What has not been consistent is these rainfall numbers in the short term. We're now seeing those come up slightly, again, bouncing around a little bit here. But the rainfall numbers have come up slightly Sunday into Monday. That being said, I may end up later on in the forecast putting in a weather impact alert day for the valley by Monday because it is trending wetter. Unfortunately, we have the A's home opener for downtown Sacramento. The A's relocating here for a couple of seasons, and that first pitch does look like a showery one for us, and we will be keeping a close eye on that. 55 degrees with a 40% chance of rain now. Across the Pacific, we've got those couple early storms coming through Friday, Sunday, Monday, lingering potentially into Tuesday. As we dig into next week, we've got a lot going on here. But again, the storm track remains incredibly different. Midweek next week, the European model saying we're going to be stuck in this rainy and snowy pattern, whereas the GFS starts to clear us out a little bit earlier. Those are the two main models that we can look at, really, that we tend to look at because they just have a longer a longer timeline for us to look out. Again, that does lead to more variance when you look at something because the closer you are to the actual event, the more likelihood that you're going to get a higher rate of consistencies between the weather models. So the weather changes are happening. Where we have moderate to high confidence is that in the short term, we're going to be cooler than average and have a wet pattern. Where the lower confidence comes in is the precise timing and totals plus the snow impacts, in particular when we get into next week's weather cycle. So let's take a look at this again. This is going to be the European model. What I did is I put the European model on one map, and then I'm going to show you the global forecast model right after this. So here's a look at what we're in right now. Saturday, all models are saying we're going to be in a dry outlook for Saturday. Storm track remains to the south of us. Here's the big weather system brewing just off the coast. Sunday, again, it does appear that we're going to be wet throughout most of the state, at least through about central California, and have a snowy weather pattern for the Sierra. Here's that low just off the coast. Okay, so that's Sunday, wet throughout the state. Monday, same situation as this low starts to pull through the Pacific Northwest. We're wet throughout almost the entire state at this point. Snow continues for the Sierra. Tuesday, still wet as that low moves through the Pacific Northwest. So it's just kind of sliding in what we call a zonal pattern. So kind of from west to east, storm track still well to the south, allowing that cooler air in. But by Wednesday, on the European model, we start to pull that off to the east, almost in a complete easterly fashion there. Now, here's a look at the global forecast model. Saturday, again, a dry forecast. No changes there. Here's the weather player that we're looking at. So as we head into our Sunday, there's not much change here. There's a lot of consistency that we will indeed see a wet forecast for Sunday. Not a ton of accumulation, but at least we're seeing kind of that consistent rain throughout Sunday and snow for the Sierra. Now we played into our Monday forecast. So here we are on Monday, and you can see how this is pulling through the Pacific Northwest. There's our snow in the Sierra. By the time we get to our Tuesday morning, that's quite a bit different. Instead of going over to the east a little bit more, the global forecast model has this coming right through the Sierra and would keep us in a more rainy and active weather pattern. Again, storm track really doesn't change. And then by Tuesday evening, that's sliding its way south, wraparound moisture, still a lot of snow for the Sierra as we start to head into our Wednesday. That's why I'm saying there's two models that we rely heavily on for this forecast that have two different scenarios of the path that low will take. So here's how we boiled it down right now. I will say this. We may have to kind of bump all of this into the earlier part of the forecast for that weather impact alert being more widespread, impactful conditions. But this is the way that things are playing out right now in the early Friday afternoon forecast. We will be updating this as we get closer to the event. Of course, that A's forecast, a very high likelihood it is going to be a rainy one. As of right now, we'll keep an eye on it as well as that extended outlook.